Dritan, Stefan, great to have you on the podcast here today. How's it going?
Great.
Doing well, thank you.
Stefan, you've been on before. You've co-hosted with me before. So we're going to kick it over real quick to give the audience an opportunity to get to know you a little bit, Dritan. So tell us about yourself and HarrisX.
Wonderful. Well, HarrisX is a market research company and data analytics company focusing on new technologies, and of course AI is the name of the game today. So we've been partnering with HumanX over the last 6 months to essentially conduct the largest study of decision makers from the C-suite all the way to big division leaders in medium and large scale corporations around the country to understand how are they thinking about AI, how much resources they're deploying towards AI, and whether or not we are in a hype curve when it comes to this new innovation and technology, or whether the investments are real and I would say purposeful, right? And that's an important word when it comes to any new type of technology. So that's us in a nutshell, and that's what we've been doing with HumanX.
And can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the initial key findings, or I know you mentioned it a little bit. Maybe we'll kick it over to Stefan.
Sure, yeah. I mean, look, this as Dritan mentioned, this was the largest and most comprehensive study done to date of decision makers. So we really had a ridiculously comprehensive quantitative study, and so a couple 100,000 data points across over 1,000 companies. So really got deep into what was keeping people up at night, what was working, what's not working. So it's a treasure trove of data. So some interesting things. I think to me the most fascinating thing in the entire study was almost everybody. In fact, it was about 90%, independent of sector, size of company, or role in company, answered in the top 2 boxes for this question. Generally speaking, how much would you say you know about AI? We're talking like 90% said they are basically experts, which is clearly wrong and also terrifying. And when we got the results back, I asked Dritan, did you somehow invert this? It was supposed to be like 10% were qualified and 90% weren't? No, that's the answer. And so what's that tell us? Even in anonymous surveys, people are still probably afraid as a leader to say, I don't know when it comes to AI. And that's bad for a couple of reasons. They're not thinking critically necessarily about the highest, best use of AI in the organization, and or they're deploying whatever a salesperson gets in front of them or a cool demo they see on a website, hoping that's going to find them this pot of gold at the end of the AI rainbow. And that's just, that will only result in tears at the end of the day. So there's a real need, clearly, for something like HumanX, as an example, to help leaders gain that confidence and conviction about AI and hopefully get them to that 90% confidence level. But I would argue that, very few people on the planet have 90% confidence level about AI, certainly not over 1,000 executives of large companies across the planet.
And Dritan, I want to make sure if there's anything you want to add to that. Thanks, Stefan.
Yeah.
Stefan is absolutely right. So when you push these executives a little bit harder, 43% will tell you that their AI strategy is quote unquote developing, and another 26% or a quarter will tell you that it's exploratory, right? And so it's important with any new technology to be wary of overconfidence. And what's fascinating about AI and what we're noticing is that actually between over half of all of these executives that we surveyed, and as Stefan said, it's key executives in over 1,100 businesses in the country. Some of the best known Fortune 500 companies are represented within our study. A majority of them said that they are putting between 10 to 25% of their current budgets towards AI. So at the same time that most of these strategies are exploratory or under development, And frankly, there's a lot of like fire and aim after firing type strategies in place. There's a significant amount of money that's going towards AI. And again, that gives us some room for pause and for consideration. Are these executives really making the right bets? And is their budget efficiently being deployed towards the right kind of AI bets?
Well,
What are you seeing in
go ahead,
terms
Jared.
of like, because this seems to be an issue too, oh, sorry, Stefan, you want to add
No,
something?
no, no, no. I mean, I was going to follow on with kind of the so
sorry.
what on that one. It's okay. Maybe we can. I'll do this and we can move on.
Oh,
But
wait, no,
Dritan's-
follow on with that. I'll follow up after.
Yeah,
Please.
That's great.
The thought.
So Dritan's absolutely right, and in fact, I think one of the parts of the study really highlighted this. And in fact, if you ask these people, how do you measure the success of your AI projects? And 45% overall said revenue growth. That's how they measured AI was successful. 44% efficiency improvements, 44% cost savings. And so that's interesting. That's the mindset is AI is going to grow revenue. It's going to make us more efficient. We're going to save money. And then when you ask the next question, what have you actually seen in your company as a result of your AI deployments? By far, the biggest thing is customer satisfaction / customer experience. So could that result revenue growth at some point? Of course it could. But if you look at the delta between how many people expect revenue growth to be their number one takeaway from AI versus how many are actually reporting it is a takeaway of AI, it's almost double digits in every single sector. So it's just, again, it highlights this fact that people are deploying AI in ways which might be an okay ROI, but I would argue there are very few organizations today who have a solid framework or rubric to figure out where they should be putting that wood behind the arrow to maximize their ROI.
Yeah. And I would add to that, Jared, that we love paradoxes in the data because it allows you to understand what's really going on and kind of put your thinking hat on. And what's fascinating is that 4 out of 5 of these key business decision makers say that their organization's current AI capabilities are on par with the leading players within their industry. So there's quite a bit of overconfidence going on, and obviously in a situation like that, there's a lot of opportunities for blind spots. There's a lot of opportunities for black swan type events that can come in and really shake an industry to the core. So at the same time that a majority are telling us they're exploring their strategy with AI, they are developing it, they're not quite sure the direction that they're going on, 75% or more are actually saying, you know what, we're doing a great job. And so again, that gives you a little bit of room for pause. As Stefan said, some of the use cases are well understood, especially around customer service and around bottom line efficiencies. But many of the use cases that will truly impact the strategies of many of these companies, really, they aren't within the horizon of most of these business leaders and business decision makers. And again, that's where a lot of thoughtful engagement is required.
Let's talk a little bit about because there's when you talk about these particular areas that a lot of these leaders are investing in, right? The obvious ones are like the customer service seems like the most obvious use of AI, right? But there's also so many areas that I think it was Stefan. It was when we had James Carrier on from NFX, and he was talking about there's so many platforms and the applications that are going to be created that don't even exist today, right? So we don't even know what that future use case is going to be. I'm not sure if this is something you ended up polling, right? But how does that factor into things? Also planning for, I tell people we're always in the sci-fi era of, I know you can't fully commit to putting together a whole plan for something that isn't yet created, right? But it's very likely that certain things or new applications are going to come to light. it's kind of a
Yeah,
complicated question, but I would love to
no,
kind
not
of
at
hear
all.
both your thoughts.
That's actually a very good. It's a very good question. And there's one question that comes to mind. I'm not sure how I can remember 220 questions, but one comes to mind, which was really around how are you using AI in your long-term planning, your short-term planning, or your day-to-day operations, and it was pretty interesting. The majority, I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the 60s or 70s. Said, in essence, they're using it primarily for long-term planning, and it's not having a material impact on short-term planning or day-to-day. So I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, literally, why is this? And part of it could be a generous explanation, like you just gave, Jared, that people are saying, well, this is going to evolve so much in the next 2 years that we want to kind of save our optionality for the long term of impact of this, or wait to see what people do, or wait to see what our competitors do. That's a generous interpretation, I think. I think the more likely interpretation is that they're kicking the can. And because they don't really understand what to do, and because there is no clear, again, rubric or framework. I mean, there is, but it's not widely distributed for people to think about how they deploy AI. As a result, they're kind of saying, well, day to day and short term, like that would require work and tiger teams and projects, and long term planning we can kick down the road to our strategy day and hope we can have some brilliant insight in 6 months. So that's one where I think one example of how that James Courier concept is manifesting.
By the way, that episode opened my mind up to like amazing. So many different, he's
been ahead of AI, Gen AI in particular, for way before anybody else was into it. Yeah, he was so far out of the game.
So, let's actually, I would like to continue on that, and maybe Dritan, we can give you an opportunity to comment on it as well, particularly in the long-term planning, because I feel like that's the real gray area still today. It's continuing on what Stefan was talking about, like what other insights were you pulling out from these in terms of how these executives are viewing long-term AI planning?
Well, I mean, translated into plain English, what that data finding means is that they haven't really quite found out the business model innovations that this new AI technology unlocks. And most of the successful companies, especially in Web 2.0, right before this new AI push, it was really business model innovations driven by technology that made the difference. It was the leveraging of different types of technologies within the current consumer journey, within the current flow of business, that really had significant impact. And that's how I read that data finding. One thing, though, is very clear within that same exact question that Stefan mentioned, which is smaller organizations are lagging in their future planning for AI. About 21% of business decision makers that work in businesses with 1,500 employees or less are saying that they're allocating less than 5% of their annual budget to AI. So there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to the democratization of AI, right? And the accessibility of these large language models and these platforms to everyday businesses to truly unlock the economic benefits of AI in the economy. And so there's a lot that you can read into that question. I think that business decision makers within medium-sized and large-sized enterprises, they don't want to be left behind, so they're allocating resources in the hopes of finding a business model that attaches to the technology, or a disruption that they can bring about through the technology, but they don't have a clear sense of what that is, what those use cases are. On the other extreme, most of the innovation that we know that happens in small to medium-sized businesses, when it comes to the world of AI, it's still not very accessible to these types of businesses, and there's a lot of work to be done on the democratization of this new technology.
That's such a good point, Dritan, just to follow up on that. If you look at, I mean, the data is absolutely correct. What you just said, it's a small amount of SMBs that actually are able to devote material resource, and that makes sense. Like in our study, before we even launched HumanX, really kind of below 100 million is AI cannot just be a material part of the business. In most cases, there are some exceptions, obviously, but below 100 million bucks. I mean, your IT budget maybe is, if you're a crazy spender, it's 10 million, most likely 5 million. And we've seen the expense of some of these tools really compound, especially if you have multiple tools for different things. And so it makes sense that smaller companies are devoting less money towards AI. But I think that's one of the reasons we're so excited for HumanX. As Dritan mentioned, the democratization of AI is critical because the big companies, which we saw, can afford to go hire a Bain, a BCG, a McKinsey to help them figure out their strategy, which has been done many times. And McKinsey in particular has some really incredible case studies around a large, very, very large auto manufacturer who could attribute $1.5 billion in savings to their AI initiatives in year one, like spectacular results. But those are out of reach. Those types of consultants, those types of strategic guides are out of reach for almost everybody else, unless you have that kind of money to deploy in those areas. So really figuring out how we can bring forth a lot of the learnings that happen in those larger companies to smaller companies. That's a key thing we're doing at HumanX, but it's a key thing the industry needs to be focused on so we don't end up with a huge stratification and frankly, an under delivery of value across the entire commercial chain, which is what's going to happen if we let this happen.
What about in terms of pricing models that are going to be impacting to how people are leveraging? So like, everyone's so used to the software, that subscription model, and now we're kind of seeing more of a usage model, which is fine. Again, if you're this massive company, you're probably fine with a big bill if you're using lots of it. But I think that can add up depending on what you're using it for some of these smaller companies and even mid-sized companies, because now a CFO doesn't have exactly as clear of a financial picture, right, of what are we going to be spending on this software. So what do you kind of think of in terms of pricing models?
Well, let me take that one, and you take yours as well, Dritan. But it's funny because I look at this now, to your point, as almost the evolution of the gym model, where you've got companies basically saying it's a usage-based price for a lot of my AI systems, and so if I'm selling a consumer-facing or business-facing product that uses someone else's technology, that I pay for by usage, I have to bank on breakage, basically. I have to bank on 10% or 5% of the folks will use the hell out of it, and then 90% of the folks will never use it at all, or use it once and never again. That's how gyms, as we all know, kind of are able to oversubscribe their gyms because they know that breakage is so high. And so I think you're beginning to see, and we saw companies early on in the Gen AI journey who went totally upside down because of that exact thing. They thought, put this out there in the world and see what happens. And all of a sudden, they just get crushed because their product is great, but there's no revenue model behind it. And so I think it's going to be a big shift in the consumer or business, a buyer perspective. And I can see it just like in the old days. You probably have metering, probably have client access licenses. You have different ways of kind of tamping it down. Because at the end of the day, these companies that are developing these products have to make money, otherwise they aren't companies. And they'll need to figure out a way to fairly and price it in a way that makes sense for the consumer.
It is interesting to see how there's a slight shift in behavior, though, that has to happen too, right? From I'll put my credit card in and I'll start using it, or even free trials seem to be different, right? It's like I've been using a lot of different AI tools, and they'll give me like the credit model, right? Here's your credits to get started, and then go from there. Right. Which actually I think it'll convert more people, honestly, because using this credit system makes me want to almost use it more once I really like one of the tools that I'm using. It's interesting. I want to make sure we have time for one more question, and this is kicking it back over to Dritan, because I know he'll have a good answer, but he'll be biased on it. What are you most looking forward to about the HumanX conference?
Well, as Stefan mentioned, going deep into the business implications of AI, the social implications of AI. I don't even want to get started about the political implications of AI. But obviously, with the change in an administration and this new technology coming really to the foreground and coming really to life and blossoming. Um, a lot of the decisions that will be made in 2025 from a regulatory perspective, from a business model perspective, as you all were just talking about, from a democratization perspective and so forth, these are decisions that will determine how fast this industry grows and where it lands over the span of the next decade. If they're done right, they'll set the right guardrails, the right frameworks in place. If they're done wrong, they won't. And these decisions will be made in the corporate boardroom, will be made by entrepreneurs, will be made by regulators and government agencies in equal part. And it's really the dance of all of these factors together that any business that is dealing with AI today has to make sense of. So for me, looking at it all holistically, after the beginning of a new administration, in a year when AI is really coming to the fore, that's really what I'm looking forward at HumanX, and obviously unveiling our data fully, right? So we're holding a lot back. Sorry to the audience, but we're going to have a heck of a lot more, and we're going to be trending this data. We're going to be going to field again, get another snapshot at where executives are, and based on the questions that we receive on the back of podcasts like this and other different types of conversations that we're having, we're listening to you all, taking those questions, and we're going to basically reflect that in the next wave of research. So all of that will be present in person in the post-pandemic world. I'm happy to say in person at the HumanX conference in Vegas.
Yeah, on that topic,
Here
just
quickly.
very quickly, yeah. On that topic, just one more kind of fun data point I thought in the study was around regulation, as Dritan was talking about. And we asked, who should regulate this? The companies who are making it, the governments, private organizations. And it was pretty interesting. And most people thought that the companies who are making AI should be the ones who are regulating it, which I thought was interesting and a little scary, to be really honest with you. It's like the cat watching the hen house, or fox watching the, I don't know, my analogies are terrible. But then if you dig a little deeper, the reality was people want a multi-stakeholder regulatory regime. So they actually want to have some company-led regulation with the government also playing a role, with some courts playing a role. So nobody was willing to say, we want all government regs, we want all private company regs. There was a real blend of, we actually want to have a multi-stakeholder solution here to how we think about regulating AI, which is great because there's no chance that the government could do it on their own, and there's probably we wouldn't want the companies necessarily to be solely in charge of regulating AI. That would be generally a bad outcome. But look, as Dritan said, this data we have so much data. We're so excited. Good.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think some of these companies they want to have that multi-stakeholder kind of regulatory body where the government's still involved, but they want to avoid the old Zuckerberg at Congress where they're like, you can track anyone on your cellular phone device, where they don't even understand the technology that they're talking about, right? We need the people in government that are, are aware of what AI is doing.
Octogenarians asking
bottom line,
questions.
People, bottom line. I mean, the public in general and the founders, the creators, the builders of the AI space, none of them are against regulation. What they're against is regulation that stifles innovation, stifles economic growth, stifles the creation of jobs. And I think that whereas in the crypto space, for example, this current administration, which is outgoing, kind of got it wrong and engaged in a lot of regulation by enforcement. No clear rules, but the SEC is going to whack-a-mole you or play whack-a-mole with the industry based on the decisions that the SEC wants to make. I think that was kind of the wrong approach, right, to a new technology. Enter AI. The leaders within the AI space don't want to repeat that, right? They are for the right types of guardrails and against the types of things that will not allow the United States to be the leader in AI globally and allow AI to really act to the benefit of society in general, whether it's economic growth, whether it's wage and labor opportunities, and so on and so forth. So I think that, to Stefan's point, really that's kind of the fine point. Now, this is where art meets science, right? And it's also one of those topics of discussions at the HumanX conference, because everyone is going to have a slightly different perspective, and all of those perspectives have to come together into a new consensus around the AI space and the AI industry.
One more plug, then we can wrap, Jared. One more plug. Again, we have this incredible data set. We are excited to release it to the world. We're actually working right now. HarrisX and HumanX are working together. We'll be announcing the ability for people to subscribe to this data. So there's different tiers of subscriptions. So companies, and frankly, I mean, of course, I'm biased on a bit, and this is certainly self-interested, but companies that are, any company, honestly, should have access to this data. Is this a reality? And it costs a lot to create it. 1,100 people, companies is not a cheap thing to go field at this level. So we'll be charging for it, but we believe there's real value to companies having both this current snapshot plus the ongoing snapshots plus ability to do custom research as well that HarrisX can do for them. So it's an advertisement clearly I'm making right now, but look for our announcement very soon around how we're going to make this thing available, make this data set available, and even have AI. You can ask the data set questions using AI to help figure out the answers to your particular your industry or your role or your size of company. So it's going to be, I think, well, it is the most interesting resource I've seen out there to date because it is so comprehensive. And the fact that we're committed to continuing to update this on a regular basis, to watch those trends and see what's working, what's not working, by industry, by size of company, by role in the company. Like, that's just, to me, as a leader, if I were still leading a large company, which I'm not, but if I were, I would say my old jobs, I have to have this tomorrow. So.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us here today. Look forward to future conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Stefan.